move it here. Okay, now that's the first slide. Thank you very much. And yes, as you heard, I'm a regulator. So usually we are the bad guys, giving too many rules to drug development. But I hope at the end of my presentation you understand where we are coming from and that we are trying to help in development programs. This is my disclaimer, no conflicts of interest. And I will focus on the high-level regulatory clinical background because of the time constraints on the main scientific and regulatory challenges for psychedelics. So there's an unmet medical need and increasing interest in psychedelic drugs. We have in the EU mental health problems that affect more than 1 in 6 people, and the major depressive disorder, as we already heard, is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Up to 20% are considered non-responder to standard antidepressants. And so we have an unmet medical need, and that is something where the psychedelic drugs can be studied. That is also possible despite the schedules. So, and the evolving landscape of psychedelic research you can see on this slide, where we are coming from. Albert Hofmann in 1938, huge experimental suicidal experiments. Before then, in the 70s, we had the war on drugs coined by President Richard Nixon and the schedules. But then slowly in the 90s and then 2010, psychedelics take flight again, as you can see in the third slide. And in January 24, in this year, there was even a Horizon Europe project with 6.5 million EU funding for first psychedelic study in patients with incurable diseases like COPD, MS, ALS, atypical Parkinson's disease. So psychedelics studied for everything. And in this, I think we need to be aware that we come from stigmatization to expectation, and here we need some regulation, I think. And this is just an overview of how many trials we had, a doubling of trials in the EU Clinical Trials Register from February 2023 to April 2024. So there are meanwhile some more, but it's a doubling in 1 year, so quite in progress. And I would like to highlight the recent activities from the EU regulators in this context. So we had in April this year this EMA multi-stakeholder workshop on psychedelics to coin a regulatory framework in the EU. And we had stakeholders, all kinds of stakeholders there, from patient representatives, FDA, TAGA from Australia, Canada. And the key messages of the workshop can be read on the EMA website. So the link is on this slide below. So there are the presentations, and there's also an oversight paper on that. And the key messages were that the development programs for psychedelic medicines must adhere to existing regulatory frameworks because they are medicines in this context. And the early dialogue with medicine regulators is critical to ensure development programs align with the regulatory requirements. And while the medicines regulators, it was said, are responsible for the oversight and approval of medicines, they do not regulate the practice of medicine itself. That is in the outside world. So there are additional publications and conferences in the years. We had the ECMP New Frontiers meeting in March 2023, so some of you were there, and we had also a regulatory workshop on the Insight conference in Berlin, and then we started to rewrite the EMA depression guideline. So I was responsible for that one, and the updated EMA depression guideline is in the 3rd revision, and it was just timely to do this update because it has not been done since 2013, to take up also guidance on rapid-acting antidepressants, as it was developed learned from the approval of Spravato, and we also put in a section on psychedelics in this. And these are the types of challenges we do have with psychedelics, not only scientific, but also legal, implementation challenges, regulatory fine-tuning, but I will talk now only on the scientific ones. So what is in the guideline? So second bullet point 2, as with all other antidepressants, to establish a positive benefit risk, randomized double-blind placebo-controlled short-term trials are needed, and as well as trials to determine the maintenance of effect. Why the placebo? Because we need to characterize the safety. That is problematic, but I come to this soon. And due to the safety profile and challenging study setup and execution, it is recommended to start development in a more severely affected population, such as patients with TRD, so a stepwise approach to learn about how to handle this. And the psychoactive effects of currently investigated psychedelic agents represent several challenges for the design, conduct, and interpretation of clinical trials. And the main challenges mentioned in the guideline and that were also discussed during the workshop are, of course, the placebo and comparator issue and the functional unblinding. So how can this best be handled, either with an active placebo or with a low dose? So this is very important. And attached to this is the expectancy bias, the positive and the negative one. And we recommend low dose or active placebo in one of the studies, but we also need a placebo-controlled study. Very important, as we heard in the last session, the dose finding and justification for the adequate therapeutic dose. That is something we need to be justified in phase 2 trials before we move into phase 3. And we need to characterize the maintenance of effect, the endurance, and the need for recurrent dosing. We need this pre-approval. I think we have a slight difference here to the FDA requirements, which can do that post-marketing, but we need a maintenance of effect study for approval. Then the issue of psychotherapy and psychological support. Is it just supportive or is it an integral part of the therapy? Why is this important? Because it has an effect on the label and on the study designs. Because if it is an integral part, we have to do a factorial design. We have to tease out what is the role of psychotherapy and what is the role of the psychedelic. So if it is just for safety reasons, we just describe it, and it has to be standardized in the setting and training. And also the training of psychotherapists needs to be ensured. And of course, safety is important. We have to have a safety database with the most important problems. Psilocybin has not so much an addiction problem, but there might be other products coming. And of course, the cardiovascular effects and anxiety and negative trips. And there is, of course, where we have to talk and we have to get to lies very early, the HTA and post-approval considerations. How is this paid? How is psychotherapy be coined in? And there we have several platforms to do this and to work together. So that it is not easy to license products, was shown by the FDA rejection of MDA-assisted therapy for PTSD treatment, which was a great surprise, as we already heard by Rick Doblin. So we hope that this does not happen if you are early engaging with the regulators. What can be offered? We have several platforms. We have an innovation task force. When you are very early in the development, if you have an idea, to come to EMA or to the national competent authorities. We do have the Scientific Advice Working Party for scientific advice. We do have specific qualification procedures for certain methods and instruments. And we do have parallel consultations in parallel with the HTA. So these are, and we do have the regulatory guidelines, which we are constantly updating, and the new EMA clinical trials regulation. So I come to my conclusion because I already got a sign. So psychedelics need to be regulated according to general standards for drug approval. The field is dynamic and constantly evolving, and regulators are aware of that. Regulatory guidelines are constantly adapted if scientifically reasonable, and appropriate risk evaluation and mitigation strategies supported by data need to be developed. And scientific advice and early dialogue is recommended and is probably helpful. And even for small companies, there are fee reductions. So please come to the regulators, talk to us how studies could be better set up if you want to have it approved as a medicine. So my question I didn't put on was targeting the hallucinogenic to a HTA receptor without eliciting hallucinations may be achievable. We heard that on the ECMP New Frontiers conference. And so is the subjective experience needed for therapeutic benefit? So we didn't touch upon that, but this is an interesting question we might talk about and discuss about. So that would make things sometimes easier, I think. So, but this is now my end. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm curious on any kind of questions we have later in the session. Thank you very much.